Hello, good night to all the viewers. Welcome to Legalize, this 6th day of October 2024. Tonight we discuss the issue of mental health in general and also the issue of mental health, the elderly, and the law. We once again have several esteemed guests. Dr. Sonia Nixon is a Cuban-trained medical doctor with postgraduate qualifications in global public health and human and social studies from the world-renowned Boston School of Public Health. She has worked in the field of mental health in Bermuda. Mr. Jerry Edwin is a U.S.-trained attorney at law with a very active practice in Grenada. He's an advocate for the rights of underprivileged people in general and for mentally challenged people in particular. Mr. Jomo Thomas is also a U.S.-trained attorney. He's a former Speaker of the House of Assembly in St. Kitts, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and a strong advocate for the rights of underprivileged and vulnerable people. The main statute in Grenada, which provides the legal framework for issues related to mental health, is the Mental Hospitals Act. It is an act going back as far as 1895. That act basically equates mental illness, with lunacy. The act contains 52 sections. The term lunatic is used 244 times in the act, and the term lunacy is used a further 17 times. The act states that a lunatic includes an idiot and any other person of unsound mind. The term unsound mind or unsoundness of the mind is used 9 times in the act. Terms like stress, depression, inability to cope, psychological pressure, burnout, fatigue, they do not appear in the act. On the other hand, the World Health Organization describes mental illness as mental well-being, describes mental health as mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. WHO says further that mental health is more than the absence of mental disorders. It exists on a complex continuum which is experienced differently from one person to the next, with varying degrees of difficulty and distress, potentially very different social and clinical outcomes. Mental conditions, WHO said, includes mental disorders and psychological disabilities, as well as other mental states associated with significant distress, impairment in functioning, or risk of self-harm. People with mental conditions are more likely to experience lower levels of mental well-being, but this is not always or necessarily the case. Before we get into tonight's program, I would like to thank the sponsors of this program, GEL Professional Solutions, GEM carrying this program out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Thank you, Tao.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Thank you. I'm hoping Mr. Edwin will join us a bit later. I've not seen him as yet. I'm not getting in touch with him as yet. But Dr. Nixon, you heard the
I didn't hear
contrast.
much of. I'm sorry, I didn't hear much of the introduction. There was just very, very little sound for me.
Okay. Oh, it's a pity. It's a pity for that. What we are
But
really
go ahead. We'll figure it as we go along.
yes. I just in the introduction looked at the contrasted position between the definition of a description of mental illness, mental health in our legal framework in Grenada and that of the WHO.
Okay.
I pointed out that the Act in Grenada goes back, the legal framework, the main statute that deals with mental issues is referred to as the Mental Hospitals Act, in fact. And it's an act going back to 1895. And this, the central theme in it is lunacy. It basically equates mental illness with lunacy. It describes and it defines a lunatic as included, as it says, an idiot and anyone with any other person on some mind. So, as the person with being an expert in this area as a medical doctor, I just wanted to get your take on that, so we could jump off from there for today's discussion.
So good evening to you and our other guest, Jomo Sanga Thomas. Good evening. It's my pleasure being with you guys here this evening on this warm Canadian Sunday evening. Um, mental health is the pariah of health. I'll tell you that. Because nobody who does not work in mental health really wants to be associated. And a lot of the challenges that we have in taking care of people who have mental disorders, from the minimal, the depression, to the anxiety, to schizophrenia and other diseases that are very difficult, to especially engaging people who we call difficult to engage, people on the street. But that kind of language, difficult to engage, is not included in our mental hospital. That is what it's called, Act, because it means that um, if we talk about mental hospital, we have not yet, and we talk about lunatics, we have not yet engaged, we have not yet embodied the issue of the human being as a person and a person with needs and the respect that a person needs. If I were to come to you or Dr. Layne, for example, and if I were to come to your office with diabetes, you will do everything to make me control my diabetes so I can go back to being well. Because you know that I need to be well so that I can take care of my kids, I can do my job. Do you understand? I can continue to drive the bus, or if I'm a pilot, whatever I do, I can return to a normal state of life. If I were going to get married, I can still get married and have children. You got me? If I were a schoolgirl, I can complete my schooling and go to university and do my career of choice. When it comes to mental health, our law does not provide because it does not take into consideration people. It talks about a lunatic, which is in its own way carrying a lot of stigma, a lot of disrespect, a lot of marginalization. So just taking it taking mental health as an issue. The laws do not guide the health professionals as to how we should treat people. If you look at countries like America, the United States, I want to say, and the UK, which we're probably closest to and more aware of when it comes to health management issues, and even like Bermuda, I worked in Bermuda in mental health for 4 years, and they have laws, they have very strict laws that which reflect the issue of patient-centered care. Like everything else we're talking about in every other area of health, the patient must be at the middle of it, must be able to make decisions. There must be laws that protect them, etc., etc. This does not happen in our environment, and that is a great misfortune because we don't have any guidelines, legal guidelines, okay, that that tells us this is how you look at a mentally ill patient. Children have the United Nations law of the rights of the child. Why mentally ill people, who are probably going to be 20% of a world population, 20% of the people in the world, are actually going to have some challenge with mental issues at least once in their life. So why aren't there laws that will take care of them? Why aren't there programs that are structured well enough to take care of them and to ensure that they
What
can
percentage you
return?
said?
I'm sorry?
What
20,
percentage?
about
20%.
20% of the world at some stage has a mental illness. And that would be from an anxiety or depression up to schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorders, and the more severe illnesses, the more
And
severe irritation.
that statistic goes back to when?
This was 2007, I think, World Health Organization. I'll tell you. 2004,
Okay.
right? So
Probably
it's still there.
with all the wars and all the disease that's where the world go.
And of course, if we were to look at it, the other
That
thing is
really,
that, yes, it says across their lifetime, that's in 2001, over 25% of people develop a one or more mental illness. All of us do have some form at some stage, most of us at some stage. That 25%, a lot. That's more than, it's only 13% of us have diabetes. Okay, so it's a lot of our world population to have disorders, a plethora of disorders that we do not have any preparation for. The other thing is that people with mental illness often present with behavioral challenges, right? It might create fear for the caregiver or for the service provider, but the service user has his own problem. I'm not going to call him a lunatic. I'm going to call him a service user for these purposes. He also has his own anxieties that he is so his thinking, etc., might be so distorted that he's unable to express that anxiety and may become violent physically or verbally or otherwise, or just to have interactive behavior that we do not know how to control. And yes, does he deserve care? Yes, we do. Do we have methods of caring? Yes, we do. But it also must be done in a informed and humane and responsible way, so that his dignity is not challenged, is not lessened, so that he can return to that state of wellness where he can be as normal a person, right, as productive a citizen as it can be. You did mention the World Health Organizations, didn't you? Describe the World Health Organizations, which talk about people being able to handle everyday stressors. So even if you've had a nervous breakdown, and which I think is usually related to depression, anxiety, and often situational, um, you should be able to go back and be able to, in the future, manage it or know where to seek support to prevent it. Okay? And that is what the laws are supposed to provide for. That somebody can actually get to a point where they know I can return to X place. That these laws are protecting me and my well-being, not just a country, because sometimes you have to do that. If you have somebody who's really stark raving unwell, you're gonna have to put them in a place where they're safe, right? And where we are safe.
Okay, Doc, it's a pity you didn't hear the
Introduction?
yes, because I'm gathering from you that you are focusing on what the WHO talk about the mental health being on a continuum, varying
Mm-hmm.
degrees. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gathering from you that you are speaking about the extreme cases where someone may require confinement, which
No,
is
not
what,
necessarily.
well, this is what our act deals with, because it is significant. It is described. It is titled the Mental Hospitals Act. Yeah.
And I did mention in the beginning that it's a pity that we focus on hospitalization, because that is not all there is to mental illness.
Yes,
that's not all there is.
That's what I'm taking. But your 25% that you speak of
speaks of everyone.
Speaks of everyone, and it is referring to this continuum.
This continuum, right? Yes.
The extreme case will be a case where somebody requires confinement, at least for a period.
Yes, hospitalization and
right.
hospitalization, and there are reasons why you hospitalize somebody.
Right. What would you describe as the lower end of that continuum? Because the WHO talk about people who are unable to cope. Let me just. I'm sure you are.
Yeah, I do have the definition here as well.
Right.
The people who are unable to cope. So the lower end is just somebody who.
For example, let me give 2 examples. Over the last few years, several professional cricketers have actually retired from the game because they say they have experienced burnout, right? And the reason given was basically mental health issues. The other professional sports people, some have taken a break from the game, some have retired. Would you describe that as an issue, a mental health issue?
It can be, but I want to go a little further than that. I want to go on World Health Organization's definition of health, because I think that's what we have to take into consideration. Health as a bigger phenomena. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, social well-being, and not just the absence of disease or infirmity. So in considering healthy people, we must take into consideration their mental health as well. So the athletes, whoever they are, complaining of burnout means that we have failed to take into consideration one major component of the health. And we know that there's no health without mental health. So if we don't have parameters within which to function and to ensure that people's mental health. So for example, if they don't have an employee assistance program, if I had to work in what's a big organization, St. George's University, for example, which is a big place, high stress place to work, or working with someone like Hubbard's or Huggins, which are big companies, right? People should have, or even in government offices, where you have a lot of political strife and people compete and they have different stuff, right? And there are problems, the office politics, you probably want to call it, right? There are issues of bullying, etc., that occur that can create stress. Having something as simple as employee assistance program may be able to I don't want to say mitigate, but help to solve the problem, the mental problem that an employee can solve. Having counselors in schools, in all our schools, for our children, right, can help children to cope with problems of abuse at home, neglect at home, whatever is going on, death in the family, other things. So having a gamut of services is important to ensure that we can keep that health status of people in general intact. And that is a responsibility that has to start at that mental health must be considered as a priority within the delivery of health within our country. But it must work within parameters that are humane, not calling people lunatic, right? Not referring to lunatic. And in this, the law that we have today, 1895, 65. Guess what? Nobody who was born at that time is alive today.
And I should just point out that I've heard Robert Ferguson King's on several occasions speak of having actually done a revision of the law maybe over 20 years ago.
Yes.
To bring it up to date and to modernize it. But I don't think that went any further than a draft.
And that's unfortunate because
consultations all over the island. That's what I understand. But,
and that's unfortunate.
So, for example, you are saying, for example, under our law, an employer has to provide a safe system of work. That's one of the common law obligations,
Yes.
right? So, for example, the tools are supposed to be safe. Yeah, the system of work is supposed to be safe. You have to ensure that the employees, in particular, where there are issues of risk of people being injured, they are well trained and well prepared, and they have safety gear and all of that. Would you say that where there are where a workplace might be a high risk in terms of stresses, mental stresses, would you say that you would recommend that some form of mental support, psychological support should be part of that system?
I'll go further to say that I saw the draft for the new ILO guided employee act or employment act. I don't remember what it's called. The labor laws that
Mhm.
should have been modified in the last, I guess, from COVID to now. I don't remember exactly when it was,
Yeah.
right? Did not include a mental health component.
Mhm. It did
So it
not
means
include.
our draft did not include a mental health component. I was aghast. In a time
Mhm.
like this where we have globalization, where we're supposed to see everybody like each other, it did not include that. In a time like this where we know that we've been subjected to a lot of stress. And well, now even the post-COVID era, and you remember in COVID how much emphasis was on mental health, because that is a component of workers' well-being that was most overtly affected. All right. And if, like I said, if you're gonna focus on that great issue of globalization, we are going to have to be like how the rest of the world behaves. So, as I wanted to say originally, what Casey Ruggles did in 20 whatever that was 2004 5 probably doesn't really apply completely, totally no, because there's a
It has to
greater
be
focus
updated and upgraded.
because globally there is a greater focus on the human rights component of
Mhm.
of 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 of, of the law as it applies to people's well-being, right? And just improving tolerance. For example, do you know that stigma to related to the management of mental health emanates principally from the healthcare providers? Go figure. Unless we understand and we have guidelines and we have legal guidelines and we have education and knowledge, we're probably not going to be able to give what the patient deserves anyway,
Mhm.
regardless of how simple or how extreme the case may be.
Okay, so to shift us just a bit, because these issues may be closely related in terms of special protection for the elderly,
For what?
because elderly people, because as you know, mental health issues are often
Prevalent.
associated with age. Yeah, you speak of Alzheimer's, dementia. Yeah, and generally physically, as you get older, you're not as robust and strong. You become more vulnerable. In your practice and training, uh, I don't know if you want to comment on any special risks that are faced that our society don't provide for or we don't address.
I think we kind of don't address the social component as per material and human resources, but there
Okay.
is laws that protect the elderly, and you can be very severely punished
Mhm.
for elder abuse. So that we have. However, what we still need to understand is how do you treat people who behave differently?
Okay.
What are their rights?
Mhm.
If you're gonna take somebody, so my grandmother gets ill, I need to go to work and I'm the only person in the house. I need to find somebody. Am I gonna just take a lady down the road who doesn't understand when my grandmother started to fling the knife and the fork and throw pillow and tear it up and all this? Or am I gonna find somebody who is tolerant and understanding and trained? So that there's that component of human resource development related to ensuring that the elderly are well taken care of. People who understand. Because my grandmother says she don't want no food today and she tell you a lot of bad word, doesn't mean that she doesn't need food. What skills have you developed in order to be able to ensure that she's appropriately fed and above all in this time when it's so hot that she's appropriately watered? Or is it that you have not been watering her that she has been behaving badly? So just understanding how caring for the elderly is a responsibility, is a legal responsibility we have to ensure that the persons who deliver care understand what they're going to do. Don't just put any and anybody to fill a space because there are special needs. And often they manifested with cognitive disability, with people just being feeling that I'm the old person here, I make the rules and all the rest of it. Often, however, there is some cognitive changes that occur in the elderly and can be
I'm not
easier
sure.
not to implement.
I'm not sure I agree with you in terms of us. We have there have been strong laws for the protection of elderly people.
But from my understanding, there are laws. I don't understand the depth. I don't know how deep they may be, but I understand that there are laws for the protection of the elderly.
Well, there's a law for what we have what we call a maintenance act, which deals with uh, maintenance of both children and elderly persons, provides a
You mean
compensation.
material
All of
maintenance?
all of those, but I don't know to what extent. Yes, for children it is applied, but I'm not sure to what extent is applied to elders. I don't. I'm
But I
not
know there are. I have heard of laws that protect the elderly from abuse.
okay. Well, I think those would be laws that protect people in general from abuse, because I'm not aware of specific laws, which I think they ought to be
They ought to be. So my
directed at.
understanding is that there were laws. Maybe because I know that there are there, I think that there are laws specifically for that. But there have been a lot of
Yeah.
talk about abuse of other abuse and what can happen, what can be the outcomes, the punishments related to
For
elder
example,
abuse.
you have the Domestic Violence Act, yes. You have the Maintenance Act, that's another one. And there are common law principles and doctrines that can be used. So maybe
Well,
we bring in let's bring in a lawyer here on this now. I'm saying, I know it's not with us, but uh, Mr. Jomo Thomas is from St. Vincent. I know the legal framework in St. Vincent is very similar to that in Grenada. And Jomo, two issues which always arise with regard to elderly people is the issue of advantage being taken of them with regard to their property, and also as regard to the making of wills. Uh, and Sonia, that's one of the areas I was kind of thinking about, because I don't know there are any specific laws that will mitigate that risk, because that's an everyday thing. You hear about that every day, you know. So, Joe, I would like you to comment on those issues. And these are two big issues. You are muted.
Thank you so much for having me on your program again. And I think I was on a program before with Dr. Nixon. I can't recall. Or it might have been, maybe my memory is taking me all the way back to one of those sessions that we had for the
in Grenada.
anniversary of the revolution. But it's always a pleasure to hear her speak and to speak with the force with which she speaks. Yeah, so the issues regarding advantage of the elderly, it's live. And it happens quite frequently. And it does not just happen in the Caribbean, it happens across the world. And there's always that need to protect people, or to protect the elderly. But there are a number of cases that deal with these. You know, you have to, certainly, it happens a lot with wills. You have to get a feel that when a will when a will appears, whether this will is the true and accurate and last testament of the person in the event that the person is deceased. And two, if that's the case, you have to then figure out whether there are questions of undue influence, whether somebody who was closely related to the testator had some kind of overbearing relationship, interaction with that person that may have led them to do something that they may not have wanted to do. There's also the question of when someone becomes more advanced with age, what happens with their mind? You mentioned earlier the whole question of dementia and Alzheimer's and the devastating impact that could have on one's mental faculty. So those are a whole series of questions that arises as a result of that. The person losing their mind, the person, there's undue influence on that person, or someone taking advantage of a situation. And I think there are a lot of cases now that deal with these kind of questions. And if you are, in the case of a will, if it is purported that an elderly person or an elderly person who died made a will, and it seems as though there's some suspicion in the will based on the mere wording of the will compared to what people might have known. So for example, someone knows that Ewart Layne's father was very, very close to him, and Ewart Layne had spent all these years taking care of his dad. And then there's a will which says that, and the dad had always expressed an interest in, look, this parcel of land, at least I want that to go to Ewart Layne. And then sometime later, dad dies, and there's a will which shows that there's nothing going to Ewart Layne, and that may throw up some suspicion, and the person who is the beneficiary in that will may have to prove, not may have to, has to prove that the testator intended for that to happen. In the case of undue influence, you have to clearly demonstrate if there's a claim of undue influence, well, then you have to prove, if you are claiming that there was undue influence, you have to prove that the testator did not know what he or she was doing or did not intend to do as the will says. So there are ways in which the elderly can be protected in that regard, but that does not stop at all for persons trying to do things which may not be in the best interest, well, not in the best interest, but which may not properly record the intentions of an elderly person in a way.
I think, Jomo, one of I shouldn't say a problem, but the context, and I don't know if you'll agree with me on that, and also Sonia, it's that people in Grenada, I suspect in the Caribbean, and maybe worldwide, I suspect less so worldwide. In fact, less so people who are wealthy and have a lot of assets, right? Namely that they tend to wait until quote unquote the last days to make a will. So you see, they'll wait until this. As sometimes they say, I'm ready to put things right with my baker. I want to make provisions because I want to leave. Or if it is somebody who is younger, if they experience illness like terminal cancer, they will wait and seek to make a will. Because why I say that, to me, that's part of the context that we have to look at when you examine these issues, because outside of that cultural context, I would say it is always to be, right? Not suspicious is probably too strong, but of concern, and you need to make a check when someone makes a will and then they die within days, they die within a month, they die within 6 weeks of making that will. I understand something, there's nothing wrong because that's how they do it. Some people just keep their strength, and when they make their will and they make their provisions for when they leave, then almost as if they give up. They feel, okay, I ready to leave now because
Everything in place.
Yeah, I'll put things in place. So you have that challenge, right? But it also creates the possibility of taking advantage because they wait until they probably have lost a lot of the mental fortitude and physical strength. They may become more dependent on others, and they're not rational in those circumstances in terms of their decision making. Yeah. So that is always to be a challenge. And you see the cases, yeah, and many times the judges are called upon to basically make a call, a judgment call as to what happened, and so I don't know if you want to just comment on this.
Well, that is quite true. That I think, in a real sense, I am not sure that people think that they're going to die. So,
No, we're not going to die. We're not supposed to.
So we have what we want. I have a gentleman that I have a really close relationship with. And I knew him ever since I was a boy growing up in Morris Village. He's now in his 80s. And he tells me, look, I want to set this thing right. I want to leave this to my children. I don't want my children to be fighting. And I went to his house about 3 times already in the last 2 or 3 years. And he has not yet come to the decision as to putting this thing down on paper. He's about 83, 84 now. And he has a fair amount of assets. So there's either going to be a mad scramble in the end, or some kind of problems may develop. I hope not, but some kind of problems could develop, not may develop. And then I had a case recently where a lady, I knew the lady quite well. We had done some work in our office for her. And she had had this relationship with this gentleman over 15, 20 years. The man died. The man got ill. He went to the hospital and she was there every day. Nobody else was there. And when she was going to see him, he says, look, Sonia, when I come out, I will do the thing. I'll set it right. The man died. And then there was a swarm of family members. And before the man was buried, those family members, knowing that he had not married to this woman, locked the lady out of the house where she had lived for 20 years. So those are the kind of horrors that we have. I mean, in that case, there was no will. But I'm talking about the kind of going back to the point I was making, that people don't think that they're going to die. So he was saying, when I come out, I will make sure I do it this time. So the point that you were making and the kind of difficulties that we have with these kind of issues are real living issues that we see across the Caribbean. And I don't know, and I think this is why these kind of shows are really important, to get people to put their lives in order, to put their things in order, so that we don't end up with the kind of problem. Let's do it rather soon. You could always change it. You could make a will at 50, and then at 65, change it. And at 75, change it, depending on the change in
Then you could change it.
Yes. But I never understood. Well, let me not say I never understood. Most people don't do that. And I think it all goes back to, I'm going to be here for a long time. There's no rush. There's no need to, I think that's the word. There's no need to rush to get it done.
Yeah.
But
Also,
but is it also
they feel you call it debt. If
is it
you
Right.
not also
decide to
a,
be
Exactly. Yeah.
is it not also a Caribbean cultural practice? Because I remember as a little girl, my grandfather had a big shop in the community, right? And I would listen to these brothers argue. My grandfather was a village lawyer. And then, man, the only time I saw them leave the community is when they went to Mr. Hostin and Mr. Helliger and Mr. Johnson, Punch Johnson, them office, dressed in their nice clothes, really nice and clean. Never see them because they were agrarian. And I guess that thing, that kind of intrigue that it brings comes down through generations. And we are going to have to educate people that it doesn't have to be like that. Because a lot of people probably think that is how it has to be. Right? Parents dead and leave the land and all you fight or all you go and Mr. Lane will fix it for you. Right? I think we need to educate our population as to where their legal rights come into play, because that is what it is at the end of the day. What are their rights? The other thing is that you guys had said some stuff in the beginning, and I'm hearing, and especially from our standpoint, us as physicians, I'm hearing about professional responsibilities and um, are we going to be work within a certain ethical framework? One, are we going to be guided by a certain ethical framework from a bigger situation where there are laws that say, hey, you must have a mood and memory clinic, and you must have somebody who's trained to be able to say whether or not old Mr. Jomo does qualify to to does he have is he corpus mentis? Can he give, right? Can he state that this is my last will and testament and mean it and understand what I'm saying, right? Or is it just somebody else making a decision for him? So I think the whole thing has to go out of us to start with with policy, with laws, and that guide not only the legal profession, but also like the health profession, the people who give care, so we can all understand what this thing is about when it comes to somebody having a state of mind that allows them to decide how they can make decisions for themselves. And remember, it's not only about sharing the land, eh? It's about who takes care of you, how we bury you, whether or not you want to be cremated or cooked, whatever it is. Right? There are lots of things that has to do with people's end of life, time, and when they're gone. Right? And even when you're in hospital, who comes and cares for you? Right? Is it okay for you to say, look, Mary Jane, in the presence of Mr. Lane, I want to give you this, and he gets there as a witness, and that's it. How do we define all of these things and make them simple but 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 strong rules and laws, so that we don't have all the drama that comes with somebody going, especially the people who have two pence. How do we do it, and so that everything is dignified? There was a woman in Jamaica who lived in England, and she would come to Jamaica every so often and spend a holiday. And she come from the country, but she went away probably in the wind rush time. She work, make a little money, and comes and stays in a holiday in a hotel. And she would see one nephew, okay, one, and because he would come and check and stuff. And then she dies, and she dies. She came on vacation and said for how long, was there for how long, and dies. She was actually a model in the at the undertaker's place, mummified and everything, waiting for the nephew to come back. So all of those things. Remember Sarah Palin talking about the death, whatever it was. Remember Sarah Palin's talk about when President Obama said patients who want to speak to their doctor about the end of life plans it should be considered a visit to the doctor. That's all it meant. And they had the death panels, right? We have to define all those little things, because this is not 1960, this is not 1895, this is not 1900, this is 2024, where we have AI, a whole new phenomena taking over. So we have to have our laws clearly defined as to who has responsibility and how this responsibility must be carried out. Because I think sometimes it's unfair to ask a judge who don't know Mr. John or his wife or his girlfriend and how the relationship was. He may have been married to Mrs. John for 40 years, but he's been with Mary for 52, right? And how the whole dynamics. I think is unfair often to ask somebody who knows nothing about a situation to make a decision, right? And I think
But
what we have to do is to really have clearly defined laws and rules and guidelines as to how we come to, and of course within a very well, not just defined, strict ethical framework as to how we're going to apply those laws.
Mhm.
I just wanted to say though that it is true that the judge may not know the parties, but the judge don't just pull the decision
I know, but I
out of
still
the
think it's
air. I mean,
unfair.
there are a lot of you have witness statements and so on, people testifying,
And
and so
the judges generally have a lot of experience. They understand these
yeah,
things.
yeah. But the other point I wanted to make, you know, I remember to go back to this whole issue of how properties passed on. I remember before Mom passed in 2019, she used to always warn us. You know, she says, "I know when mother die, family done," and she used to say, "I hope that don't happen to you guys." But the corollary of that is this notion, and I think all of us can relate to this. Nothing makes people funny like money and property.
And death.
And debt.
Well,
In the midst of
and
death.
then, yeah.
The
So
cocktail.
you have to, and that's why it's really critically important to put things in place to ensure
And
that
plan
that
first.
that, that you
We,
do
we,
those
we- we're
properly.
going into deeply into the issue of estate planning, which is
Yes.
Yes.
one of my pet topics because
Yeah.
in a sense you can say elderly people or people who become elderly, they have the responsibility while they are young and strong to make these plans so that things could be smoother when they become elderly. But Jomo, I want to just speak about this specific case of because there have been cases where people who was certified as and confirmed as suffering with mental illness at one time, right? Uh, a could actually turn up, and there have been cases wills turn up. And the court now has to decide whether this will is a valid will or not. But if you just want to speak there in terms of the so-called doctrine of lucid intervals. Yeah, because I know there are some people who feel once somebody was mentally ill, they could never make a will. Yeah, and the person may feel so. For me, I think generally that might be so, but I think the law has taken a different view of that. So I don't know if you just want to address that issue.
Yeah, well, there are a number of cases like that where somebody may, in fact, I think one of the cases you shared with us was was it a Joshua case? Where there was this man. Was it a man or a woman? I can't remember. No, it was a woman who had been seen by doctors who indicated that beginning as early as 2001, she had had some kind of falling off in her mental capacity. And then made a decision to give some property to someone. In 2004, I think they made a decision to give some property to a child. And then in 2008, another will showed up, which essentially was doing away with the 2004 will and giving the property to another person. In that case, the way in which the court dealt with that was to look closely at what had happened. Well, let me put it this way. The court put a lot of weight on the fact that there were interventions from doctors who had clearly indicated that this person was suffering from some mental health issues. And in the end, what the court resolved is that the people who were trying to establish the 2008 will had a greater burden to show that the 2004 will was voided, and two, that the person, the testator, was in the proper mental capacity and knew precisely what she was doing by the time she made the 2008 will. And in the end, the court made the decision that the 2008 will was invalid because there was not sufficient evidence from witnesses and so on, which showed that the testator actually wanted to do away with the 2004 will and to give the asset to the parties who were claiming it in 2008. The other important point I thought was that, and this is this is the state of the law, particularly where there's an asset, which is an overwhelming asset, and that asset is being given to somebody, or somebody is claiming that that asset is being given to them. There's this notion that you have to give higher scrutiny, because why would the testator, who has children, for example, and who had a relationship with those children, would be giving the property to a mere stranger or someone who might have been a friend? But why would you give it to your friend and not your children, or not leave it to your wife? So those are the kind of issues that come. But there are a lot of cases that deals with it. I thought one of the other case that you shared, the Prudhomme case, was an interesting case because here's this man, he's in the end given a piece of property in Grenada that's valued between $1 and $3 million. And this man is saying, yeah, he gave it to me. We were friends for over 40, 50 years and he gave it to me. But he has a daughter whom he had made cosigner on his bank account, but did not leave. Well, in the case, it didn't say whether he had left that property with that.
In that case, the transaction took place while he was alive.
Yes.
Yes. So what was saying basically, he didn't understand. It was not, quote unquote, not his deed, because he didn't understand what he was doing. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So
that case was the deed was actually signed in front of the registrar.
Yes.
The lawyers saw that as a protection, because they would have understood the risk involved. But I think the court took the view that the registrar or medical person. Yeah.
Right.
So my question here then is, where does the responsibility of the healthcare professional lie? Does the healthcare professional have what level of, what capacity should they have achieved to be able to determine whether or not somebody has a clear mind enough to make that decision? Okay. In other words, can every and any doctor evaluate a patient and say, Mr. Joe is fine? Or is it because he just knows Mr. Joe and say, Mr. Joe, all right, yeah, make Mr. Let me give the friend. Where can you, and you don't have to answer this, I'm just asking questions that probably don't have answers yet, unless we have a proper legal framework complete. Because I don't know that we have anybody here who is.
What the case law seems to be showing, though, what the case law seems to be showing is that the court is going to give more credence to someone with some kind of medical training over someone who is a lay person who is saying, oh, at the time when this will was signed, this man or this woman seemed to be in a proper state of mind.
Right.
But for example, in those cases, what the doctors had said is that the man's mental capacity had begun to deteriorate, and there was some medical test which shows that you can't, once you're in that state, you continue deteriorating over time.
So I agree with you, but does the court say that you have to do X test, Y test to prove that a person, yes, is not going to precipitate as far as his cognitive abilities? I'm just saying this because I think those are things we have to take into consideration to make it foolproof and clean. We do not have clearly defined laws as far as I know. I'm subject to correction on this, right? To ensure that if you ask me to see your grandfather and to decide what his mental state is, do I have the capacity to say yes, right? And to figure out whether that can change tomorrow, to decide whether I really should check him again tomorrow, if he notices every so often, he might change. So are we going to make sure that there is the healthcare professionals who are capacitated to do that so that we can remove all the doubt and make it an easier process? That's all I'm saying here.
I think one of the issues is that a lot of times when people do wills, they're not even thinking of these kind of most time they're not thinking of these kind of mental health issues. So they may not think that we have, it is when the problem develops, then you get to the issue of what would a doctor say, or what did the doctor say? For example, that person may have had a personal physician, and was that physician seeing that person, and what was the prognosis based on observing the person over time, over years?
I think
And
there's
the
sorry, so as I understand it, there's no fixed way of or prescribed way of.
In our jurisdiction.
Yeah, there's no prescribed way of presenting the evidence with regard
in
to
our jurisdiction.
Yes. With regard
Because
to
there are other jurisdictions where you have to have somebody who is specially trained to be able to say, who is knowledgeable according to their qualifications, should be knowledgeable to make that decision. I'm just saying, so that when we develop our laws, we make it as foolproof as possible, so that we don't have to be fighting and say, you say, here it is, it was given by XYZ qualified person, and this stands in the court.
Right. So that may be a good time to just report a comment here from Jacqueline McKenzie, who I was all the way up to the 5 hours ahead. Says the UK has a Care Act 2014. It sets out the legal framework for how local and central government authorities should protect adults at risk or neglect. And of course, she says Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights provides further protections around care and dignity. Elder abuse is a big issue everywhere. The UK's probate registry is trained to spot and deal with anything suspicious. It would be useful to have a specialist probate registrar on desk in the OECS territories. But she admits it's not easy, because on the one hand you want to protect elderly people, but on the other hand you don't want to take away their power or their agency and their freedom to do things. So, for example, a personal example. My dad going to be 101 next month. Yeah. But there are certain decisions that he wants to be the one to make. And he would not tolerate any one of us or any other person making those decisions for him. So you have that balance. Huh?
But then again,
somebody may have a mental issue at one time. But I think the issue I was getting at is that the law recognizes that, listen, despite the fact that someone may even have been suffering from dementia, there may be intervals. As I say, there are good and bad days. So there may be good days when they
lucid moments.
Lucid moment, yeah. Although I know, in fact, I was reading an article just before this program started, where apparently the preponderance of medical evidence now, certainly in the United States, is that once you start to go downhill, you never recover the ability to make these kinds of decisions. Yeah, they'll be defective. In other words, it would not be the decision you may make, would not be the decision that you would have made before you had that problem, or when you were, quote unquote, you had your full mind and full senses.
Well, the other issue relating to lucid moments is that the court, looking back, may not be able to say, for example, in an instance where the testator changes his or her mind. Once you set up earlier that the person had begun to go down, there was mental deterioration. How would you figure out that on this day when he or she changed the mind, that was a lucid moment? Because that's the problem.
Well, it would be on the person who is seeking to take the benefit of the will.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah, that's where it lies, because I think the evidence will have to be cogent.
But doesn't that come on the responsibility of the legal agent dealing with it?
Yes,
Shouldn't you at least have some insight?
Yes, before we go into to that point, I just want to again recognize the sponsors of this program: Gel Professional Solutions, Gel FM out of Canada, and GTAO, Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Yes, welcome back. Sonia, Doc, I think it is the quality of the evidence. The advice is that wherever you have a situation of somebody seeking to make a will who may have been suffering from, who have mental challenges or is very old, that you should have a doctor, preferably a doctor who have been dealing with the person over a long period of time, to be one of the witnesses to the will. Yeah, that's preferable. It's referred as a golden rule. But at the end of the day, it is for the people doing wills. You don't always need a lawyer to make a will. Somebody could just make a will at their home.
Yeah, I know that. But I also, I hear you guys talking about elderly. My friend just died. She was 60. She had dementia for 5 years. She died this week past. I'm just saying, let us not have it only in our mind. That is just old people. Because like your father, 101, don't need no lawyer to tell him, or no doctor to tell him that you don't understand what he must say, because he's quite clear in his mind and understand. But then, and then you also have the issue of people who just don't have the learning capacity to be able to make those decisions on their own. And that is, again, taking mental illness into consideration. Somebody who, I might have a child who has Down syndrome, and he's my sole heir, right? And he's now 45, 50, right? I'm gone. He's 45, 50, and somebody has to get a property. Can he make a decision? Maybe not, because he doesn't have the learning capacity and the academic capacity to make that kind of decision. Those are the other things that have to be taken. That is that comes within the Mental Health Act, with where you have capacity to make decision. If we had a law, if we had the law as exists in the UK, for example, the Mental Health Act, and you needed to be admitted, there are various sections of the law under which you can be admitted. You can decide whether or not you want to be admitted. The hospital can decide whether or not you're going to be discharged, and under which part of the law we're going to discharge you. Are we going to remove all prohibitions, or are we going to say, look, I'm sending you out on section 10, let's say, I'm just giving an idea, which says that if we see any change in your behavior, any deterioration, you will automatically be admitted, right? And there are various components of the law. We don't have that, and it may seem complicated, but it does offer the mentally ill person a certain amount of right. It also offers the mental health care service deliverer a certain amount of power and responsibility and execution of their responsibility. right? To keep that person wealthy, healthy, to make that person as well as possible, to know, let's send John back out into the community so he can continue to live his life. Because the ultimate reason for treating a mentally ill person is so that he can go on out there and go on with their life at the best possible.
Right. But what I want to say, so there, is that the example you gave, or the scenario you put forward, again raises the issue of estate planning. So big and passionate about, because if you have a child who has Down syndrome, is your only child, you ought to make provisions for his care, and you can make provisions as to what happened to your property after he passes. You know, rather than leave it there. And you can do that. The law, there are ways of doing that, doing it effectively. So, Jomo, I just want to shift now to the criminal law.
Mm.
How does the mental issues impact on the criminal law? For example, when you know it, you must have what we call mens rea in order to commit most offenses, right? How does the criminal law impact? How does mental issues, the issue of mental illness, how does it impact on the criminal law?
Well, in a number of ways, and quite frankly, I don't think it gets sufficient. I don't think it is recognized sufficiently. And I could speak mostly for St. Vincent, where a lot of times, and it goes back to where we started, because the mental health issues are prominent in these societies for a combination of reasons: people's economic status, people's whole dislocation, issues of hopelessness and helplessness, and the growing depression that are enveloping these societies. A lot of people are on edge, and a lot, as Sonia was saying, Dr. Nixon says, there are so many people who suffer some form of mental health problem without even knowing that they're suffering. So in the criminal law situation, you're going to have a situation where you are brought before the court on a charge, and the court has to establish that, one, you committed the act and you had the mental capacity to commit the act. Right? And in doing that, someone who is doing criminal defense may look at a set of facts and come away with the conclusion that, boy, this person may need some kind of mental health intervention. And because the thing that looms large, the person may not be raging mad, but the question as to whether that person has capacity, the requisite capacity to plead. Because a lot of times people who are doing criminal defense may raise that issue that this person may not have capacity to plead because of their mental state.
They don't understand what is taking place before the court. They don't understand whether they should plead guilty or not guilty or whatever it is, and they really don't.
So, for example, in court this week, a lady came into me all concerned that last month her son was brought before the court for striking another man with a brick. Son went to court, charge was read out to him. He says that he pled guilty. He said, yeah, hit him with a brick. And when you look at the guy and you see how the guy is acting, there are real questions as to the guy's capacity. But in addition to that, when you speak to him, he talks about the guy walking up the street next to his house 4 times and threatening him and so on. So he may have other defenses. So one of the things we had to do when we went into court on Friday was to try to convince the magistrate to have him withdraw the plea and to plead otherwise. And then
So
there's another.
I'd like to,
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question here, and not ask a question suggestively. The whole issue of forensic medicine and especially in the mental health environment, because you see a lot of recidivism, right? A lot of people keep coming back and they do a crime like that guy, right? He feeling a break this week because the truth is the guy who walking up and down the road is probably what he sees in his head. There's nobody walking up and down the road. Okay, the man is probably in his house with his children doing their homework. I'm just saying, right? I'm not saying that that is so. I'm just saying that is a possibility. And when you have somebody who's mentally unwell, somebody who has chronic mental illness and severe chronic mental illness, right? And maybe I don't know why the mother came, probably because her son has his challenges. But there are statistics that show the percentage of people who are incarcerated. What a high percentage! I think it's from the 70s of the people have mental illness. Do we screen our arrestees for mental illness? No, we don't. Do we have a forensic psychiatrist or forensic mental health person who comes in regularly, right? Even every 3 months. You might miss 10 other guys, but the rest of them will probably be and evaluate Tom, Joe, Mark, Mary, whatever, right? Just do basic. Do we have a mental health worker who screens, right, to see if there are any symptoms that may be suggestive? Because you remember the guy in the last just with the tourist murder incidents?
Well,
That was 2017, about,
yes, yes.
right? Where the guy is just coming to prison and he goes back and he ends up killing the woman, right? And everybody say, oh, but that guy crazy. And then we tend to just, oh, I'm a madman. Let the guy go away, right? Or put him in a jail. But maybe he's not in jail he needs to be. Maybe he needs to be in a forensic unit. And those are the things, if we want to be global.
Actually,
But part of the problem, we may not have a forensic unit.
Right.
No,
So I want to come to that because I just want to point out that S.M. Barnwell, Zita is saying in the criminal law, mental health illness is not a full defense unless it is insanity, which is a question for the jury. In the case of murder, death, manslaughter with diminished responsibility is usually the charge. So,
which is unfortunate for everybody, I think, because I think we need to identify, because I can tell you, because I've seen it, there's a lot of recidivism even in minor cases in people who are mentally unwell. How do we protect them? Because our responsibility, and I'm looking from a healthcare perspective, our responsibility is to keep them well as possible, so they don't have to face the embarrassment of being picked up by handcuffs, beaten by people in the street, etc., because they do not function what we consider normal, right? That is my view as a physician, as a mental health advocate for people with mental illness, as it refers to the courts.
Yes. So with regard to the capacity to plead, which Joe was addressing, Zita is saying that the capacity to give instructions, i.e. to plead, is determined by a psychiatric assessment.
Yes.
And that's a forensic.
And the difficulty that we have had in St. Vincent over the years is that we have not had a resident psychiatrist for as long as I am practicing. And whenever we had them, well, we don't have one, they're itinerant. They come, they spend 3 months, they spend 6 months, and then they are gone. And with that situation, you have regular doctors who may not have done any kind of psychiatry at all, making assessments and may declare somebody fit to plead, when if you had had a forensic psychiatrist, that forensic psychiatrist might have done a much more in-depth analysis of that person and come away with the view that that person did not have the mental capacity to plead.
And his assessment would have greater fidelity. And
yes,
the truth is, it's unfair, because it may be better for you to make Tom sit in custody in what, a remand for 4 months, 5 months, whatever it takes for the forensic psychiatrist to come, so that he can be dealt with some level of finality, right? And like I say, his dignity and his safety can be restored, instead of somebody like, I love psychiatry. I've worked in psychiatry for 6, 7 years, right? But I don't know that I can say John is fit to plead. I don't know that I have that level. I don't have that capacity. And most of my colleagues don't like psychiatry, so you can ask them to come and evaluate someone to decide their life, where they go from here. That's unfair to the person.
Right. And
So we're gonna have to get serious about what we're gonna do.
Zita is also saying, which I want to actually point out. She's saying that mental health center St. Vincent does not have a wing for mentally ill persons who come in conflict with the law and are therefore held in prison. So that's what I wanted to come on to. It is one thing for a finding to be made that you not fit to plea. But there's a case in Jamaica, a lawyer who appeared on this program recently, Isaac Buchanan, he in fact acted in that case. There was
the guy who was in prison for 50 years?
50 years in prison.
Yeah, and nobody remembered him. Yeah.
Well, remember, there was the case, the St. Bryce case out of St. Lucia, where the man was in jail for 36 or 37 years.
Precisely. And there have been cases in other OECS islands. I think there was a case in Grenada. The person died in prison, 30-something years. He was there and not fit to plea. Yeah? So that's the second problem. There's a determination you're not fit to plea, but then you get lost in the system. There's also the problem that we don't have, and Zita says you put them in prison. I think there's the same problem in Grenada. You don't have a wing for what is referred to as the criminally insane.
Forensics, yeah.
As regards a point about insanity, the issue of insanity as a defense goes back. The case from which that emerged is a case from 1843. And they say basically a number of things. You have to have a defect of the mind.
That's
right?
the McNaught case or something like that?
McNaught case.
Yeah.
And it's a case where you must not know what you're doing. So, for example, when you talk about Sonia, you have cases of somebody believing that spirit they beat him, when in fact they causing harm to somebody, right? They don't know is that they think it's some spirit that attacking them. They don't know the nature of what they do.
Or just might be drunk or high on cocaine or heroin.
That's not sufficient.
That's not sufficient.
What I'm saying, no, but you can claim that they can claim that you're in a state of insanity at that point. I'm just talking about your mental capacity at the point in which you committed the act.
Because you see, in our law, intoxication, for example, is an aggravating feature.
Is an aggravating feature?
Yes, if you
have not seen people who become mentally ill.
No, I'm talking about the lawyers. I'm talking about
I'm saying, and again, we come back to the issue that we have to revisit our law to suit contemporary the environment as it is now.
So
in
what
1890,
what the law has done so that to mitigate that? Not in Grenada, but in St. Vincent, they have brought in something called diminished responsibility.
The what?
Diminished responsibility.
Okay.
On manslaughter.
And normality of the line, they say, one of the famous cases coming out of England is the slow burning fuse. It was a defense for a woman who was brutalized and battered in a relationship for years. Yeah? And then she lost her mind. And basically she killed the person who they abused her for these years. And the court said that, listen, that's a slow burning fuse kind of defense. Yeah? So that's what they have done. And also, when it comes to sentencing, you can use mental illness, mental issues as they say to mitigate the sentence. But insanity in the law is a very, very high standard. You have to believe you have to believe you are. If you're born if they charge you for arson, for example, and you want to have an insanity plea, you have to believe you have a cigarette you lighted. And then realize the house you bought it. Yeah. Or nothing was wrong with it. Because you know there's hell or some kind of thing. So it's what we'll call raving back. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, the thought went up my head.
You said, in fact, you know, so I sit and I listen, and I'm here listening. And the truth is, what we've done with a lot of this mental health issues and the law, right, is really just compartmentalize something that doesn't always need compartmentalization. You have to integrate and think. And while I understand the criminal law thing, I mean, not as well as I should, but the truth is, I think we have to still focus on the fact that every individual has the right to a good life. Every individual has the right to access to health care, to be defined for whatever deficiency there is in his general health and well-being, and whether it be mental or otherwise. And in this case, we talk about mental health, that he have access to care and to be safe, as much as making sure that other people are safe, right? In his whenever they're in his space. And sometimes we just can't compartmentalize it that much. There has to be integration. And that's why I talk a lot about forensics. And we have small territories, and I think we can come together and have clearly defined boundaries. And we're going to have to set up infrastructure. But these are our citizens who require special needs. So even if they kill off the whole of the population, and because of insanity, we must be able to understand why this happened. Okay, I've seen people who I've had patients. I work in psychiatry, and I've had patients who I'm examining them, tell me I'm fondling them, and I don't even touch them yet. Okay, so I'm saying, trust me, right? And there are ways to cover that, but the bottom line is that I think the first thing we have to do is not look to allow people to be at a point where they become criminals or they are facing the law. I think we have to look first at people's rights, right? And what our responsibility as leaders in our society are towards everybody, and specifically towards the people who have or are potentially mentally ill.
But look, I think a big problem is that, as we know, the people who generally commit crime are from the lower classes, and there's a certain stigma there. But in addition to that is the fact that there's not a lot of sympathy for one,
and that comes from stigma.
People who have mental issues, and two, people who are quote unquote all called criminals. So with that, the points that we have to get to a certain civilized
common space
where we see people as human beings. For example, there's the American human rights attorney called Brian Washington, who says that no one is as bad as his last worst act. So whatever the person does, there's still a humanity there that should be respected, and effort should be made to repair it. But in the context where somebody might have done a societal wrong, a grievous societal wrong, there's not a lot of sympathy for finding humanity in such a person. So society generally says, let's lose that person.
Yes,
because we put negative values on them.
Yes.
I just want to take a comment from Bob Marshall because it raises this flip side now. He says in 2016, Dave Benjamin killed an American tourist in St. David. I think that's the case you spoke about, Sonia. And a mutual friend met her husband last week in Pennsylvania. I can tell you, the husband is still unable to come to grips. that now raises the issue of you throw the person in jail, but you ignore the victim. And it deals
And
with
that's another layer on the onion.
precisely in terms of mental care, because that will have an impact on the victims and the close ones.
And as a physician, I'm going to say, and hence the reason why we have to have appropriate facilities, proper evaluation, proper care for people who have mental illness, so that they don't advance to that level where they can become dangerous to others and create pain for other people, because it's equal pain for the people, for the mentally ill person's family. It's equal pain for the communities where they come from, the embarrassment and all the rest of it. There have been murders, there have been people who have been killed in our mental health facility, right? And that is also because we don't have forensics. But the point is, I think it is very important that we focus on having appropriate mental health laws that comes from the basis of come from the whole idea of basic human rights for every citizen of every country that we represent, right? So that they can be taken care of, and so that we, at the end of the day, can be safe and well, and they as well. Do you know that people with mental illness are greater victims of violence than they are perpetrators? Think about that. That is statistically proven.
But the important thing, in addition to the laws, we need to ensure that we have the resources.
Yeah, but it's important. So if we don't have resources, we're not going to do nothing about it.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So, for example, we could sign nice international treaties and have the laws on the books, but if you don't implement them, and to implement them, you have to have the resources. You have to commit the resources to that. So, for example, you have psychiatrists, you have the forensics you speak of, you have facilities where you can provide the care.
And different healthcare providers.
It takes resources. Okay, so we are coming up to the end of the program. I just want again to thank those who are sponsored and enabling this program. Jail Professional Solutions, JMFM, carrying the program out there in Canada on the FM station, and also GTAU, Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Final comments, Doc?
So, you notice I smile every time this ad goes, because I keep saying that our unions that care and purport what TAU propose for its workers really need to include mental health wellness, mental wellness as a very important component. And also, I've actually spoken to some of the union leaders, the whole issue of estate planning. So when I go to work at 21, and I'm always with the same union, I know at the end of my 40 years of work, 42 years, whatever it's going to be, right, that I will have accumulated, I would have had all these options to ensure that my retirement is good and I don't have mental health problems. I really look forward to all the stakeholders coming together to ensure that we have viable and toothed mental health laws that really protect our entire population, whether you're mentally unwell person or have the potential to be, or whether you are a potential victim for whatever can happen as a result of somebody's mental illness. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the death and burial of the word lunatic soon.
All right. Jomo, before I want you to just comment on this. Jackie saying, I disagree, Jomo, that people who mostly commit crimes are from the lower classes, whatever that means. They're just the ones who more likely to end up in the criminal justice system and prison. comment, and let's have your last comment.
I didn't hear the last part. All I heard that she disagreed that people who commit crime are from the lower classes. I wasn't talking about white. I wasn't talking about white collar crime.
That's
You know.
it. That's it.
Well, actually, I take the point. I take the point that Jackie's making. When we look at the jails, whether it's in the Caribbean or in the United States or in England, the vast majority of people who are in the jails are from the lower classes.
Yeah.
White collar crime is a big thing. It does far more damage, and those people are from the upper reaches of society. They are well connected. They can hire good lawyers. They can get proper defense. They may not end up in jail. But so the point I was making is that the people who are represented in the jails are the ones from the lower segment of the society.
All right. So your final comment now.
I thought that was a final comment.
All right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Doc. Thank you, Jomo. Thank you to all the viewers. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
And tell
Bye.
Zita to tell her sister hello for me. Zita, please tell your sister hi. Yvette. Bye, Jomo. See you soon.
Bye. Take care.